What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you guys are having a wonderful Monday evening. So let's get into this Real Housewives of Atlanta Sweet 16 episode 8 recap, Boots on the Ground. So it begins with Shamia. You know, Shamia always has a song in her heart. And listen, if I lived in Sterling Hall, I would always have a song in my heart too. Okay. But she opens the episode with, her singing a country song. Shout out to Beyonce and Cowboy Carter. She kicked off her tour today. So that was the theme of Porsha's birthday party. And that was the theme of, this part of the season, right? So they're in Nashville, they're doing it up. Shamia says, Porsha's got a birthday, and she's singing her little song. So cute. So after Shamia's introductory song, they move on to Brit Edie, talking with Mike. He seems a little bit more, engaged and interested, which is nice, right? Because he's been essentially paying her dust for the entire season. So for him to give her, just a little engagement is a nice change of pace. And, they both tell each other they love each other, which is great. So I'm hoping that he will be more warm and affectionate throughout the rest of the season, but who knows? Speaking of warm and, affectionate, we move on to Shamia's husband, Gerald. He is so supportive and nurturing. He's with their daughter, who's not feeling the best, but, he tells her, don't worry about it. He's holding it down for her to go and have fun with her girlfriends and, just live her best life, have a great time in Nashville celebrating Porsha's birthday. Gerald is such a breath of fresh air. You know what I mean? Like, he is such a sweetheart and he treats Shamia so well. And I can appreciate, how she loves and, just appreciates him and their family dynamic, especially since Shamia opens up later about just, the frogs in her past that she kissed before she got to her prince. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so then Cynthia and Angela are talking about, Drew showing up to the trip, because you guys know that Angela is the one who invited Drew and not Porsha, being oh so messy. Cynthia, she's like, I'm so tired of Drew being on her way. Where is she? Where is she at? She needs to come and clock in like everybody else. So, Angela shows her the phone and, she's like, she's coming. She's on her way. Don't worry about it. She shows her proof that Drew is actually at the airport and she's on her way, which, again, Atlanta to Nashville is, I think it's like an hour flight, maybe less. So, she's there, the next scene, she actually opens up the door and she's like, what's up, bees? And, like, oh my gosh. Drew, well, that's why you got the room that you got, because of the way you came in. But anyway, so she greets the ladies and she asks them, what's up? And so they tell her, there's a whiskey tasting and they're learning how to bartend. The bartenders are really cute, by the way, which is great. So Drew is, she said that in her confessional, she was first deciding whether or not to come, but she said she wants to extend an olive branch to Porsha, which I can understand that she's showing up in good faith. Of course, she wants to get paid as well. But extending an olive branch to Porsha, in my opinion, is not necessarily a good idea unless Porsha is receptive, to receiving it, right? Like when it was Shamia and Angela, there was a basic baseline of respect and they were open to receiving each other's apology. I don't feel like Porsha is there yet. I don't feel like she has the emotional maturity and that level of emotional intelligence to be able to really accept Drew's apology or accept, I was going to say not even apology, but just accept the fact that Drew is working with Dennis, So while Angela's getting her makeup done by her glam squad, Drew asks about her room and she she walks in. And, and she sees the bunk beds, and Drew's like, "Oh no, it's giving orphanage." Like Drew's next record is gonna be Hard Knock Life, the remix, right, from the movie Annie. But listen, if you show up late, if you're the last one, of course you're gonna get the worst room, you know. So listen, and Angela reassures her. She's like, "We're not gonna be spending that much time in our rooms anyway, so it's fine." And Drew's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna come in here and spend more time in your room." I don't blame her. Listen, I don't blame her. I don't think it's as bad as it has been in past seasons. Cause some shows, like, I don't know how many of you watch Love and Marriage Huntsville, but they were in St. Thomas and they were making a huge deal about the rooms. And the rooms, they weren't even that bad, but other franchises too, they would sometimes draw straws or, try to make it as fair as possible, which I always feel like is a great idea. But Drew, you did come really late. And since you were the last one there, you're going to get the orphanage room. So that just made sense. Okay, so day 2 in Nashville, all the girls are getting glammed up and they're drinking, kind of pre-gaming. They have a chef there, Chef Dev. He's making them, cocktails with vodka and gin and, just how the girls like their drinks. And everybody has on their, cowboy gear and they're like, they're cowgirl goddesses. Which I think is, it's really nice, right? Like they're supporting Porsha in her theme. And so Portia's in her room talking about how she's eating ribs and she's going to she's going to tear them up. Listen, I'm here for it. If you're in Nashville, I'm sure they have some really banging barbecue spots. I'm a fan of Texas barbecue myself. I love the brisket. I just had some brisket. Actually, earlier today, I had a brisket. Never mind. But I had some brisket earlier. That's what made me think about it. So I'm a huge fan of barbecue myself. Shout out to Nashville in Texas. So Drew, she says that she wants to go to the whiskey tasting. And, Portia's, I can tell, she's uneasy. She talks to Shamia about how she doesn't want to, feel like gaslit and just she's really uncomfortable about the whole issue with Drew and Dennis. My thing is, I really feel like she's putting a lot on Drew. Like she's really putting 20 on 10. A lot of people feel like it's, her way of deflecting from what's going on in her own life. Because to be honest, I mean, I feel like Porsha is, I don't know. Some people, could argue that she's reaping what she sowed a little bit. Like if you can take, Fallon's husband so quickly and easily, that is not a man of strong moral character, right? So for him to, for you to find out later on down the road that he's a fraudster, that makes sense because he already showed you the type of man that he was, when you decided to be with him after you knew he was with Fallon, married to Fallon, actually. So the fact that she's going through all of this is just, it's like, wow, look at the actions of my own consequences, right? And I know Fallon is somewhere kicking and kicking her feet because Simon is no longer her problem. So the ladies get in the party bus, and Shamia, she's like the MVP of this season. I think Angela and maybe like Cynthia clocked in this episode, but Shamia is like the MVP of the entire season. She says that she had an ex who was abusive and that he was, really great and that, he was charming, charismatic, wealthy, all these things. But he hit her so hard that he, knocked her out of her shoes. And she's just like, not here, not now. Like she was so, humiliated. She was crying. In her confessional, she's like, he's super successful. Everybody thought that he was so great. And on their 1-year anniversary, that he hit her so hard that she popped out of her first pair of red bottoms, which I'm sure he probably bought her if he was wealthy. But, just the details like that. She's like, he was staring at me, and, she's like, I don't even like sharing that story because she didn't think the people would believe her. And that's so prevalent, right? You know, so many victims of crimes, whether it's DV, whether it's, R, whether it's whatever interpersonal crimes, people tend to often victim blame or, take the side of the abuser so often, especially if that person is wealthy, successful, charismatic, et cetera, powerful, right? People love to be in proximity to power. And so for Shamia to share that story is so touching, but also, she's looking at her phone and she's like, I really feel vindicated now from the lady in the past who didn't believe her. And she's like, she really feels like, from 2005, that was so long ago, my goodness. But she feels vindicated, as she should. And so that apology, I'm sure it meant a lot to her. And now, not only can she put that in the past, but focus on her prince, Gerald, and leave all those frogs in the past, in the dust. Because now she's living her best life at Sterling Hall, raising a beautiful family. So they cut to when Kenya had her DV event, and Cynthia's mom was there, and she said that she had Cynthia when she was 18 years old, and her partner at the time, physically abused her. He hit her, and she started crying on stage. And Cynthia's like, my mom is the strongest person I know. I can't even imagine what she went through, and that would be so traumatic. Especially, one, having a baby so young at 18, you're still a teenager yourself, and two, dealing with a man who, hits you and thinks so little of you and himself. That's a reflection on you. I feel like anytime you put your hands on someone and you have such poor conflict resolution skills, that's unacceptable on all levels. It's such a violation of trust, of boundaries. All right, so the ladies split up into groups, two groups. The first group, they go to Coyote Ugly. So if you guys remember that movie with like Tyra Banks and all the young ladies, they were bartenders, and the one was an aspiring songwriter. So she wrote for Leanne Rhymes. Anyway, it was one of my favorite movies growing up. But they have a whole franchise bars now, Coyote Ugly. So the ladies are... that first group is Porsha and Shamia and Kelly, and they are learning how to do, they said, lessons in libations. So they're learning how to, have different drinks and shots and do things the Coyote way. So they're like all on the bar and, just having a good time. So group two, they're doing a whiskey tasting. So it's Drew and Cynthia and Angela and Brit. Okay, so at the whiskey tasting, the man, he shows them, that he opens up the barrel of whiskey and he gets like a long copper straw, and he tells them, that he's going to pour it out right from the long copper straw. And then he says to open, your nose and to smell the different notes, similarly to like a wine. So that's something new that I learned, because I didn't know that, of course I knew there was all kinds of different types of whiskeys, but I didn't know that you were supposed to smell it as you do like a wine tasting, but they were there, getting the different notes. So then they cut back to Coyote Ugly. And I feel like Coyote Ugly, like that group just seems like they're having more fun. You know what I mean? Like they're dancing and they're joking, like having a good time with the bartenders. And, it just seems like more of a lively place, although they're the only ones in the bar, which I know they had to do that for TV, but so they're just Shamia and, like Kelly, they're and Porsha, they're all like having shots and jumping around and dancing, and they're just having a good time, So I hope that Porsha had a good birthday, despite the fact that Drew showed up and she really got in her feelings about it. But anyway, the second group, they are, a lot more chill, although Listen, Cynthia, like I said, she is clocked in this episode. She has had several whiskey tastings. She's like, let me get a little bit here, let me get a little bit there. She's had multiple whiskey tastings. So after that, after the ladies have their drinks, then they go to a beautiful cowboy dinner, of course, hosted by Porsha. So she's like, I'm lit, but I'm ready to go ahead and, get some food in me, soak up some of this alcohol. But here's the thing that gets me, right? So as much as Porsha said that she didn't want Drew there, she's asking where she is. She said she's, tired of people asking her about where Drew is. And, she's like, well, why would you invite yourself to somebody's birthday party, not come on time? Why would you, just, she's just kind of like dogging Drew. She's kind of dragging her. You know what I mean? She's like misquoting Angela and what she said about Drew. I feel like Porsha, she really does. She really has it out for Drew. I feel like because she really does still have, strong feelings for Dennis, even though he did cheat on her. And I do feel like she's projecting a lot of negativity onto Drew, just as a deflection, to deflect from what's going on in her own life. I know she's going through a divorce, her second one, so it's very painful for her. So she's taking all that, all that energy, and she's, pushing it toward Drew, which is unfortunate, but it's like, it is what it is. So it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You know what I mean? Like, you can't be mad that she's there and then also be mad that people are asking you about her, asking why she's not there. Like, pick a struggle. Speaking of picking a struggle, Brit let the peace brunch go, right? She's again confronting Angela about, the peace brunch. She's like, I feel like, you guys didn't have my back. I feel like nobody had a level of empathy of what I was going through. And it's like, girl, I don't know what else you want them to do. They didn't had a whole brunch for you. You was cussing Angela out, telling her to read the MF in room. It did come across as very entitled. That's what Angela told her, and she's absolutely right. Because she also lied about losing her license. That wasn't true. So the empathy that she's looking for is not even based in truth. It's based on a lie. So it's like, girl, just calm down. You know what I mean? Like, have several seats. It was Kenya that you're mad at. You know what this whole trip reminds me of? Misdirected anger. That's what it is. Brit can't yell at Kenya, who she's really mad at, so she's taking that misdirected anger out on Angela. Okay. Porsha can't yell at Dennis or Simon, or to keep it a buck, herself. I feel like if Porsha really did do some real introspection, she caused a lot of this. She is really reaping the seeds that she has sown in the past, because Angela was 100% right asking her, with that Kelly, asking her, why did you steal that lady's husband? And that is a question that cuts, because that is a question that asks about your character, right? She basically called her an adulteress on national TV. Porsha is mad at herself. Porsha is mad at herself. I really feel like that. But instead of doing the work and unpacking, her own issues, she's going to lash out at Drew. Similarly to Brit, because why did you even bring up your license? That's not true. The whole internet debunked that. And it didn't even make sense because Angela, questioned and called you out about that. So you're seeking empathy from these ladies, which they threw a whole brunch for you in your honor. And they told you, that they felt bad and, they were there to support you. Again, lashing out. It was Kenya who you were really upset at. And if you really want to be honest, it was you being youthful, your whole youthful indiscretions. And we've all done, stupid stuff when we were young. But the truth is, you're not going to do that work of, doing the introspection, and you're not going to be able to lash out at Kenya So now she's taking it out on Angela. And it's just like, girl, just a whole episode of misdirected anger. Because Brit's, talking about how she was sitting in her house 3 days crying. Another person who it would be, I don't want to say it wise, but I feel like another person that she's really mad at that she's not going to address, her husband. Because why was he paying her dust when she was sitting there on the couch crying and showing him, how she's being humiliated in the public? He just seems so indifferent. He just seems like he didn't care at all. So I don't know if he was, sounded happier on the phone this episode because she wasn't there. I don't know, really what's going on. Because, Tasha K has a Tasha K has a video, and y'all know I can't play Tasha K clips because she don't play that. She's very, she's very territorial about her content, which I get that. I can respect that. But if you guys go on Tasha K's site, especially if you're a member of TashaK.com, TashaKLive.com. I'm not, but I did see the clips. Supposedly, Brit and her husband has some really close friends that are of the same sex, that they're very, very close, allegedly. So I don't know if she is mad that she heard he's on the DL. I don't know, but like I said, a lot of it, in my opinion, is just misdirected anger, fabrications about her license. She's so embarrassed about the stunt Kenya pulled. And listen, at the end of the day, it's like, it's out there now. I mean, it was already out there before, on the internet, which is how Kenya found out, through her private investigator. But now that, the episode is aired, and Angela's not going to change anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what you want Angela to do. Like, what was Angela supposed to do? She had a whole peace brunch for you with, chicken and waffles and stuff. So it's like, what did you want her to do? I'm sorry, it was Kelly who threw it. But Angela was there. She was asking you about her license, about your insurance license, because that's the field that she works in. And then, and Angela's tea was spilled too, because one thing about it, and two things for sure. Once people get on these reality TV shows and they become, these Bravo celebrities, what the internet is going to do is they are going to dig through your past and find every single piece of just tea information, background check. I'm telling you, these internet sleuths are better than the FBI, for real. Like, they will find, the bad report card that you got in the second grade or whatever the case may be. Like, they go way back. Okay, so to your first ever Facebook post, Twitter, Instagram, put everything. They come through social media, everything. So for Brit to get on here and lie about her license being suspended, looking for sympathy and support, it's like, girl, you have a whole husband, and he needs to step up and do his job, and you need to have that conversation with him. You're projecting all this stuff on Angela, and it's like, child, between her, Charles Oakley, her daughter getting married without telling her, knock on other foot, and her own financial issues, Angela has enough that she's dealing with without you trying to throw extra baggage on her, Brit. So yeah, it's just misdirected anger. One thing I can appreciate about Angela, though, is that she said, missteps were made, and she did apologize. Angela can actually own, when she messes up, as opposed to some of the other ladies. And so, she apologized, and she tries to move the conversation forward. And I get that, because life is too short to keep dwelling on, past things. Like, Drew, she's like, people make mistakes, there's missteps, but you want to continue to move forward, onward and upward. And I feel like that's what she was trying to do with Porsha, but Porsha's not here for it. I think Porsha's just bitter and embarrassed that Simon really just kind of like dogged her out, wanted to be there for, clout. He ended up, getting deported. And so she's there, essentially a single mother, which I know she didn't want to be. But she's jealous about the time that Drew and Dennis are spending together. And it's unfortunate. I feel like she's mad because she knows that even if she did, if she does still love Dennis, she in her heart of hearts, she knows that she can't trust him. Like, he's not a trustworthy partner, and it's sad because that's the father of her daughter, of her child. But it's like, what do you do? Do you swallow that? Do you take back a cheater? You know what I mean? Like, and Simon, he wasn't any good either. Like, what is going on? Girl, ask Shamia to hook you up with somebody in Gerald's circle, one of his circle of friends, some man that, has some kind of moral fiber and, has a character that has integrity. Because the men that you're picking between Cordell, Simon, Dennis, girl. I will say I do like Dennis more than I like Simon. Simon was a clout chasing scammer, an old school scammer too. Um, he kept getting kicked out of the country and kept coming back. I'm like, oh my goodness. And was just always on social media, just stunting for the gram and, embarrassing Porsha. I'm like, at least Dennis doesn't do that, like he keeps his stuff low key. That's one thing I can say I like and I respect about Dennis. But girl, we got to get you. Listen, if it was me, if I was Porsha, I would absolutely be all up in Shamia's, like, not in her face, but I would be in her ear, like, girl, hook your girl up, because obviously Shamia knows what she's doing and Porsha does not. All right, so the ladies get back in the party bus and they're talking about Cynthia being a whiskey aficionado. She pretty much cleared that bottle. Okay, she was taken aback. I've never seen Cynthia drink like that. I didn't know she was that big of a drinker. Maybe she, she was just having fun, but it was cute, seeing them all have fun together. And they're going out to the dinner. They look amazing. Everybody has on their cowboy hats, and just they look like they're ready to go to the Beyonce Cowboy Carter concert. All right, so before they go to the big dinner, the last dinner, they're coming home, and they're going to eat dinner at home before her huge birthday dinner that, I guess is the climax. But they have a chef, Chef Dev, he's hooking them up at home, and they go get ready for dinner at home. They have two cowboy bartenders, Avery and Chris, who are very young, very attractive. They both have on the cowboy hats and the flannel shirts. And Cynthia, she's like, "Ooh, hallelujah," in her confessional. They're so cute. So they're, getting their handmade cocktails for them. They have all this, Nashville eye candy around them. So they have a private chef. They have their own private bartenders. I'm like, that's what's up. Now, that's what I like to see. I know that's right, Porsha. One thing I can say, Porsha can definitely plan a trip well, okay? Because we know some of the other trips in the past, like when Kenya had, she ordered food for herself and nobody else, and Candy was like, where's the food at? Porsha didn't do that this time, so that's good, right? She definitely has the ladies there. They're pre-gaming, I should say, right? They're pre-gaming for the dinner. So they go and they get dressed, and everybody has on their like cowboy, attire. I think my favorite outfit would probably be either Cynthia, they both have on glitter. Porsha just has a long black dress. You know, she looks like she is like ready for a funeral. Drew's funeral. But no, she doesn't have any kind of like cowboy theme at all, which I found really interesting, right? Everybody else has on like cowboy hats and boots, and they have on like the necklaces, the cowgirl, just dresses and all kind of other things, and she doesn't. So she said she got another phone call where Dennis had been filming on the show with Drew, and she said that it sent her over the edge because she specifically had a conversation with Dennis about 2 months ago while they were in the car, and she said that if you film with anybody else, it's going to be a problem. I don't know why she doesn't think that Dennis is going to do what he wants to do. She should know that from when they were actually together. Like, men are going to do what they want to do. People are going to do what they want to do, period. But she just said that she was super disappointed that he chose opportunity over family. And it's like, baby girl, listen, you're not his wife. That was your decision, not his, right? To get pregnant by somebody who is, who essentially, like steps out. You have to own that. I mean, you telling him what to do and not to do, trying to direct him, that's not really gonna, change his mind. He's still gonna do what he wants to do, especially if it's a money making opportunity. He's a businessman. And you can tell that he's a businessman first, unfortunately. So, after they ate dinner with Chef Dev and bartenders, they line dance, which is really cute. They have a line dancing instructor there, so they all go out and they're out there with the cowboys and they have their like yeehaw session. They all have on their different cowboy boots and they look really cute, so they're like right together, left together. But Porsha has on slides and like this long black dress. Like, I don't know, she seems not dressed for her own event, her own occasion. It's really weird. But everybody else is, and so they all look great and they're having a good time. Shamia is, she's like the life of the party. Shamia is a fun girl. Do you hear me? That's why I said I feel like she's the VIP, the MVP of the entire season, because she is the one who is like, opening up the most. She's the most transparent. She's the one kicking it off. She's the one who's like the real housewife, the affluent, wealthy, just wife who is in love with her husband, has, beautiful children together, and she's just having a ball at this line dancing event. So they're, right on the patio, drinks in hand, and they're laughing and, they're having a good time. It's really cute. Kelly, on the other hand, she says she has two left feet. If it's not the Cupid shuffle or the electric slide, she was like, y'all can go ahead and count it out because I'm not with it. So they all sit down for dinner at the beautiful table outside, and they're asking, Porsha what's wrong. Because she's had like the stank face, like pretty much, since she came down the stairs. And again, it's your event. Like, you're the one, it's your birthday. It came to Nashville for you. The least you could do is, be cordial. I know that she's upset, like I said, with Drew's misdirected anger. She can't yell and scream at Simon because he's gone. She can't yell and scream at Dennis because he's going to do what he wants to do anyway. He don't care. He's going to pay her dust. She's not going to yell and scream at her reflection in the mirror, who I feel like she's really mad at because she keeps making these really poor decisions. So she's going to take it out on Drew, which, again, it's unfortunate. I feel like Drew is just, her target or her punching bag for her misdirected anger. And to be fair, I feel like it's not fair to Drew because, one, Drew, you shouldn't have shown up to Porsha's birthday party. You knew that she wasn't really feeling you. She wasn't feeling you. And don't go anywhere that you're not invited. But also, it's just like, it's not fair to Drew because she's making a bigger deal out of the situation than it has to be. Her and Dennis have a business relationship, and so you need to, just back off a little bit, respect that. She's not going to do that, but Shamia's in her confessional talking about a getaway car, which is hilarious. And she asked, how the whiskey tasting went, and everyone's like, it went well. So they were talking about conflict resolution, and Brit asks, Angela about the name that they gave her. Angela said, well, being honest, you guys called me Victimina. I don't know how I come across as being a victim. And, Brit, I feel like she just made that up because she was trying to take a dig back at Angela because she felt some type of way at her peace brunch. So I don't think that Angela plays victim, to be honest, but, you know, she was just asking for clarification in regards to, her being a victim or her gaslighting. And they were, telling her that she was wrong for inviting Drew to Porsha's birthday, which, listen, I can get that, right? You don't invite somebody to somebody else's event, especially if you know that they're not getting along. Like, that was crazy. So, Angela, you have to own that one. So she does. She says, if I offended you in any way, I apologize. She says, but she wants to know why is she the only one there being held accountable? And the other ladies are like, that's not true. Kelly says, that she's trying to hold people accountable, and they they cut to when she asks about, Porsha stealing that man's husband. Kelly's a mess. Kelly's a mess. And she says she got her answer. But Angela's, she's talking about accountability, and Porsha gives the biggest sigh and, rolls her eyes. Porsha, she's like, she's out of there. And she's like, no, I'm not going to answer Angela's question. I want Angela to kiss my behind. You know what I mean? Like, Porsha is just, she's not with it. And she's like, okay, well, the rest of the world can kiss your behind, girl. Porsha has a bad attitude, and she's just, she's not feeling it. Angela's like, why would I want to kiss, Fix a Flat? She's like, why would I want to kiss your behind when you're refusing to answer the question that everybody wants to know? That's valid, right? Because I want to know it as well. Why did she steal that lady's husband? Why did you think that a man you could pull so easily would be a good man for you to have? Like, no. So anyway, they're talking about the food. The guys bring down the food. And Drew says, she didn't come empty-handed. She actually got her a bottle of whiskey with her face on it. But then Drew's like, you know what? I'm out. I'm about to go. She said that, Porsha's there. She gave her a nice, nasty answer. I feel like Porsha was just paying everybody dust. Like, she just had a bad attitude. They were trying to talk Drew down, Drew and, Shamia's like, wait a second, Drew, don't leave. Don't run out of here. But Drew's like, listen, okay, well, y'all want me to stay if anybody has, a problem or, an issue, let's air it out. Nobody does. Portia's not going to, again, I feel like when Porsha is confronted, she can never answer things head on. Like, she'll deflect, she'll get upset, but, she'll try to read the girls. But when someone asks her a direct question, she folds. She folds. So Portia's in her confessional, like, she doesn't care and blah, blah, blah. She cares. She's upset. But, she's like, well, I'm not a mean girl. And, I haven't been mean to her all day. She's been mean at that table. She was paying all of them dust. And so she said, it was theatrical, let's address the elephant in the room. She's like, well, she hasn't made her feel uncomfortable all day. And she's in her confessional. She's like, well, I could have met them where they were, but, she said that her life was a mess, which is true. She said she wanted to set it on fire, which is true. She said the men in her life were a headache and a half, which is true. That, again, that's who she's really upset at. It's not even about Drew, I don't blame Drew for leaving. To be honest, like I said, Drew, you shouldn't even have shown up. I know you want the Bravo check, so I give you that. That's what I would have said. Like, girl, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Like, so, like, I'm just here doing my job. So I would have, sat at that table, ate that food, and collected my check in peace. Because the truth is, the Porsha's really, it's not even about Drew. It's about her. So she goes upstairs and she talks to Cynthia, and Cynthia climbs into bed with her. And, she just says that she feels that everything that's good is being taken away. And, that she's just like, if we go back home tomorrow, there's something, always waiting in the wings. And she's crying about her divorce and, crying about dealing with people. And again, I can understand, that's a very hurtful situation that she's going through. She feels like it's all piling on at the same time. And sometimes, life be life. And sometimes it's like that. So, um, she's crying her eyelashes off. Cynthia's like, oh no, not your eyelashes. And so they're laughing about that, which is nice, like that little bit of levity there. And it's good to see, that Cynthia and Porsha were able to put their past differences aside and, come together. And, Porsha she really listens to the advice that Cynthia gives her. That, she just needs to kind of move on. She asks how she feels, and um, Portia's just letting it all out. Sometimes it's good to, just have a close friend and just let it all out. Porsha, she has her claws in Dennis. She says that, they're co-parents, and that um, he, he has her heart, pretty much is what she's saying. She's not saying it, but we know that, because she wouldn't be crying and acting all, this crazy if it wasn't really bothering her deep down inside. So Cynthia's like, I know you're going through a lot, and, she's like, don't fall down, fall up. She's just encouraging her, and they hug, and it's a very sweet moment. Cynthia, for as much as Cynthia gets on the show, I feel like she has really been a consistent, like maternal and very encouraging person on this show. So I'm glad that she was there on the trip to encourage, Porsha. And that's what Porsha tells her. She's like, I'm so grateful for you. I love you. And I'm really glad that you're here for me. And they hug it out, and they're very sweet. So Cynthia asks her if she wants to pray, and Portia's like, you've been praying over that alcohol. Portia's the only person I've ever heard turn down a prayer. But they go back outside, and, they have on their swimsuits, and they're like, it's adult swim, let's go. So they all go out to the pool. And this is the part that I really feel like, after Porsha done hugged it out with Cynthia, and, she done cried her eyelashes off and everything, Porsha is really showing her behind, and not just literally, but figuratively, right? So they're having the dollars out, and they're, shaking their butts and stuff like that. But the real Porsha, and Angela says, she was inebriated, but she records her. And Porsha says that, she was going to, F her, F her husband, F Charles. And it's just like, Porsha, like, have you not learned anything from this whole situation with Simon? You was just crying in, Cynthia's hug a few seconds ago, and now you're outside. And listen, you can blame it on the alcohol if you want to, but the point is, it's like, you can't continue to make the exact same mistakes and think that you're going to progress in life, because you're not. You can never win when you're playing dirty, honey. Okay, in the words of Nene Leakes. Like, you cannot continue to sleep with married men. Close your legs to the married men. Somebody bring Nene back on the show, because I'm just tired. Like, I feel like we really do need. I know the door is closed and all that, but maybe Porsha should go on Nene's show, on her YouTube show, because I feel like, Porsha, girl, close your legs to married men. Talking about you going F Charles. Absolutely not. Now, Angela, she recorded her. Whether or not she could hear is beside the point. The fact that Kelly said in her confessional that she absolutely heard Porsha say that she wanted to F, Angela's husband. She was like, Angela, you know better, stop playing with me. I'm going to F Charles. That is horrific. So she's mad at Drew. Porsha can be mad at Drew for simply working with Dennis. Well, Porsha doesn't think that anybody's going to say anything about her wanting to F Charles. Like, is she crazy? Girl. So at what point do people start to see that pattern and say, you know, Porsha really has an issue with messing with married men? That's a self-esteem issue. That's a character flaw. That's a problem. And I feel like, and Angela says in her confessional, she's like, listen, when Porsha says that she wants to F somebody's husband, you take her seriously because as we know, we found out in the past, that's exactly what she did with Simon because he was still married to Fallon when he got with Porsha. That's crazy. So the next episode, that's where it ends pretty much. The next episode, has Angela and Brit going back and forth. And, Brit is going off on Angela. And, Angela's like, listen, that mouth of yours. And she's like, well, what about my mouth? And she's like, you got stretch marks on your mouth. And Brit stands up. She's like, where? Show me. She's like, you have a lot of miles on your mouth, right? She wasn't talking about literal marks, stretch marks. She was saying you have a lot of mileage on that mouth. Angela, oh my gosh. Listen, hide your wives, hide your husbands from Porsha, because Porsha, girl, you cannot be serious. You cannot be mad at Drew for working with your daughter's father, but at the same time talk about you want to F Charles because you're upset at Angela. Girl gone. So this episode, it was good. I feel like, and then she told, and Porsha in the confessional, she's like, I didn't say anything. Girl, they got you on tape. That's the thing about being on a reality TV show. They got you on tape. And if they didn't have you on tape, Kelly was right there and heard you and corroborated that story. Everybody ain't lying on you, Porsha. That is crazy. You said you was going to F Charles. And the next episode, which I cannot wait till next week, Angela tells Charles, she's like, I don't know what Porsha sees or, thinks that you're so willing to, F her, be intimate with her. Child, it was a mess. This episode was good. But anyway, you guys, let me know your thoughts. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk with you in the next one. Take care, Aces. Bye.